Imagine this. You have just landed in a new city. Maybe it's London, maybe it's Chicago, maybe it's somewhere in between, and you are standing outside an apartment building, buzzer in hand, heart, doing something that feels a lot like nervous excitement. You have practiced your English for years. You can write a flawless essay, you can hold a conversation about geopolitics, and yet the moment the letting agent swings open the door and asks, "So what are you looking for in a property?" your mind goes completely blank. Not because you do not know English, but because nobody ever taught you this English. The kind that lives in rental offices and lease agreements and slightly awkward viewings where you are pretending to love a kitchen that is barely big enough to turn around in. That gap, the very specific gap between classroom English and real-world housing English, is exactly what we are going to close today. Welcome back to the Learn English Lab YouTube channel.
That is, well, it's such a vivid, almost painful picture you paint.
Right, it's so real.
It really is. And honestly, it is a reality for so many people. That feeling of your mind going entirely blank while you are staring at a letting agent, it is not a failure of your language skills.
Which I think is the first thing we really need to establish for the listener today.
Without a doubt. It is simply a very human reaction to suddenly finding yourself in a highly specific, high-stakes environment. Because when you strip away the excitement of moving to a new place, renting a home is not just a casual transaction.
No, not at all.
You are entering into a major legal and financial negotiation. I mean, the paperwork you are about to sign, the verbal agreements you make in that hallway, they are going to dictate your living situation, your daily budget, and your overall peace of mind for the next 12 months.
Or potentially much longer.
Yes, exactly that.
Right, the stakes are incredibly high, which is why the anxiety kicks in for you. Our mission for this deep dive is to pull you out of the theoretical, safe environment of the English classroom and drop you directly into the practical, sometimes intimidating, real-world register of housing language.
Because it is a completely hidden register.
It really is. We're talking about the hidden vocabulary and, perhaps more importantly, the unwritten cultural rules of finding a place to live in an English-speaking country.
Which a lot of people just don't expect.
Yeah, because if you do not know this specific register of English, the tone, the facial expressions, the euphemisms you run, the very real risk of agreeing to terms you do not fully understand.
And that can be disastrous financially.
Oh, absolutely. Or worse, you might fail to advocate for yourself when you absolutely need to, like when the heating breaks in January.
That is a flawless way to frame it. Navigating a lease requires so much more than just translating words on a page from one language to another.
It's an entire skill set.
It is. It requires a unique blend of vocabulary, situational confidence, and cultural fluency. You really have to be able to read between the lines.
And that cultural dimension, I feel like that is massive.
It is enormous. And it is often entirely overlooked by language learners who are, just focusing on getting their grammar right.
They're worrying about verb tenses when they should be worrying about the cultural expectations.
Spot on. For instance, the actual process of renting a home in the United States is a completely different social and administrative experience from renting in the United Kingdom.
I mean, they're barely even the same process.
Right. And both of those differ dramatically from Canada or Australia. The etiquette, the underlying expectations, the unwritten rules of the transaction, they vary enormously the second you cross a border.
I want to dig into those underlying expectations because to me, that sounds like a trap waiting to be sprung on you.
Oh, it absolutely is a trap for the unwary.
We always talk about the language, but the language is just a vehicle for the culture, right?
Yeah.
So give us a concrete example of how those unwritten rules play out in real life.
Sure.
If I have a prospective tenant, what is a hurdle I might face in the US versus the UK?
Well, let us look at the very first hurdle you encounter. Proving to a total stranger that you are a reliable person to rent their property to.
The vetting process.
Yes. In the United States, the culture of renting is heavily data-driven and financially focused right from the very first interaction.
It's very numbers-based.
Very. It is perfectly standard expected, really, for a landlord or a property management company to run a comprehensive credit check.
And that's just the baseline.
It's the baseline. And they will demand to see hard proof of your income, like pay stubs or tax returns, before they will even consider looking at your application.
They want the math.
They want a mathematical score that proves your reliability.
Which makes sense, I guess, in a country as large and transient as the U.S.
Yeah.
They rely on standardized numbers because they do not know you.
And they probably will not ever really know you.
Right.
It is a transactional trust built on standardized data. But if you take that exact same mindset and cross the Atlantic to the United Kingdom, well, the letting agents and landlords have a completely different set of initial expectations.
So what are they looking for over there?
In the UK, the culture relies much more heavily on what we might call narrative trust.
Narrative trust. I like that term.
Yeah, instead of just a credit score, they usually require a reference from a previous landlord. And quite often, a professional reference from your current employer.
Wait, so they actually want to hear from another human being who can vouch for me?
They do. They want a narrative of your reliability from people who have interacted with exactly how you live and work.
That is wild.
They want to know if you paid your rent on time, sure, but they also want to know if you kept the property reasonably clean.
Or if you were a nightmare to live next to.
Exactly. Were you a nuisance to the neighbors? Are you securely employed? It is a much more relational approach to vetting a tenant.
That is fascinating, and it highlights the danger of the unknown perfectly. It is almost like sitting down to play a highly complex board game.
But you have accidentally memorized the rules for a completely different game.
Spot on. That's it, exactly. Imagine you walk into a British letting office. You were wearing your best clothes, you were feeling confident, and you proudly offer them an American-style credit check instead of the landlord reference they're waiting for.
Oh, no.
In your mind, you were being incredibly helpful, transparent, and prepared. But how does that actually land with the British agent?
Honestly, it lands poorly. To them, you risk looking uninformed at best.
Because you're offering the wrong currency, essentially.
Yes. They are expecting a very specific type of documentation, and you are handing them something else entirely.
It just creates confusion.
It does. In the worst case scenario, it can actually make you look untrustworthy simply because you are not providing the standard cultural currency they expect.
They start wondering what you're hiding.
Absolutely. They might wonder, why are they showing me this number instead of giving me a letter from their last landlord? Are they hiding a terrible rental history?
And that is the absolute worst first impression you can make when you are competing with 5 other people to secure a home.
You want zero friction. You want a signal that you understand their context effortlessly.
But knowing those cultural rules in theory doesn't help you much when you are physically standing on the doorstep. The friction we just talked about starts the literal second you walk in the door.
It really does.
In fact, depending on what country you are in, we do not even call that physical event the same thing, do we?
We do not, and this is where we really need to start mapping the vocabulary for you. The terminology shifts before you even unlock the front door.
Okay, let's break it down.
If you are in the United States, you will typically hear this initial visit to look at the property called an apartment showing. Or sometimes agents will simply refer to it as viewing the unit.
Right. And the space itself is the unit.
Yes, the physical space itself is, of course, an apartment or a unit.
An apartment showing. It almost sounds theatrical, you know?
Right.
Like they're putting on a performance for you.
I mean, it does carry a bit of that sales-driven energy.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But if you take a flight to London or Manchester, it is almost universally called a viewing or a property viewing.
So no showings in the UK.
No, you arrange a viewing,
Yeah.
you go on a viewing, and crucially, the living space itself is referred to as a flat, not an apartment.
Now, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Please do.
If I am an advanced learner and I walk into a real estate office in London and say, I am here to see the apartment, they are going to know what I mean.
Yes, they will.
The communication technically succeeds. So does that distinction between apartment and flat actually matter in the real world?
It matters significantly more than you might think.
Really? Even if they understand me?
Yes, the communication succeeds on a basic literal level. They will not be confused about what you want to look at.
Right.
But these distinctions are not just about literal comprehension. They are about cultural signaling.
Oh, the signaling again?
Always. Using the correct local terminology is a powerful, subtle tool. It signals cultural competence to the landlord or the letting agent.
It shows you've done your homework.
Spot on. When you use their specific vocabulary, it tells them, I understand how things work here. I am tuned into your environment.
Which makes you seem less risky.
Completely. It immediately elevates you from being just a temporary visitor looking for a room to a serious, grounded participant in their local housing market.
It reduces that friction we keep coming back to.
It smooths the entire interaction.
That makes total sense.
Hi.
Because you want them to see you as a peer in this transaction, not a tourist who is just passing through.
Exactly the point.
And that brings us to the psychology of the viewing itself, which is where I think the biggest breakdown happens for you as a learner. Let's go back to that image from the very beginning of our session. The person standing in the doorway, mind completely blank.
The panic moment.
The absolute panic. We see this phenomenon constantly with advanced English learners. I call it the frozen learner.
It's a very accurate term.
Picture this. The agent unlocks the door, gives a rapid 2-minute tour of the space, points out the bathroom, waves a hand at the kitchen, turns around, jingles the keys and says, "So, any questions?"
And silence.
Total silence. And the learner, who could easily debate the nuances of global supply chains in English, just freezes. They smile, they nod, and they have absolutely nothing prepared to say.
It's so common.
Why does that happen so consistently?
Well, it happens because there is a fundamental mismatch in how the learner is treating the environment.
What do you mean?
A property viewing is an active, dynamic, highly evaluative environment. But the language learner has spent years being taught a very passive form of English.
Oh, the classroom dynamic.
Yes. In a traditional classroom, you are often waiting to be spoken to. You wait for a prompt from the teacher.
You just sit and receive.
Right. You treat the situation like a lecture where your primary job is to just absorb the information being broadcast at you.
So when the agent says, "Any questions?"
The learner is waiting for a multiple choice test, but instead they are being handed the microphone.
They are essentially treating the viewing like a museum tour, where you just look at the exhibits and do not touch anything.
That is a flawless analogy. But a viewing should never, ever be passive. It is a dialogue.
A strategic dialogue.
Very strategic. And the questions you ask in that moment are not just about extracting factual data about the plumbing.
What are they about then?
They are a highly strategic move. Asking the right questions actively signals to the agent that you are a thoughtful, responsible, detail-oriented person.
Because if you care about the details, you'll care about the property.
Without a doubt. It shows you actually care about the physical space, which implies you will take care of it when you live there.
So what is the actual homework here? Because you shouldn't be trying to invent these strategic sentences on the fly while you're sweating in a cramped hallway.
Oh, that's a recipe for disaster.
You need a back pocket arsenal of phrases. Let's give you, the listener, the tools to unfreeze in that moment.
Let's do it.
Let's role play some of these right questions, because I know the default reaction is just to nod and say, "It is very nice."
Which tells the agent nothing.
Right. So what should they be asking instead to show that competence?
Let us start with a practical, universally applicable question. You are standing in the living room, you look around and you say, "Could you tell me a bit more about the heating situation? Is it included in the rent or is that separate?"
Oh, I like the phrasing of that.
It works well, doesn't it?
It is so much more sophisticated than just blurting out, "How much is heat?" It is polite, it opens a conversation, but it is firm about getting a financial detail.
Exactly. It shows you are thinking ahead to the winter bills.
What is another one they can use?
You also want to show that you care about the surrounding living environment, the ecosystem of the building.
Okay, how do you ask about that?
You could ask, what is the situation with the neighbors? Is the building generally pretty quiet?
That is brilliant.
Yeah.
It is almost like a psychological trick, like Inception.
It really is.
Because by asking if the building is quiet, you are implicitly telling the landlord, do you value quiet?
You are.
Which means you are probably a quiet, respectful person who isn't going to throw massive parties on a Tuesday night.
Spot on.
You are literally selling yourself as the ideal person to have in the building by simply asking a question about the neighbors.
It is a subtle but incredibly effective piece of communication. You are demonstrating your values through your inquiries.
Give us one more for the arsenal.
Another excellent question to have ready is, has there been any recent maintenance done on the property?
And what does that signal to the agent?
It signals that you are observant and that you understand properties require upkeep. It also gently puts the agent on notice that you expect things to be in working order.
Like, I will be paying attention to the leaky faucet.
Absolutely. And notice that none of the questions we just role-played are simple yes or no questions.
They're all open-ended.
Yes, they are open-ended. They force the agent to elaborate, which buys you time to listen, adjust, and continue the dialogue.
It gives you a moment to breathe.
And they are subtle signals that you are taking this legal transaction seriously. Which naturally brings us to a vocabulary word that you will use constantly to define your role in this relationship.
Which word is that?
The word tenant.
Oh, yes. Let's clarify this because I hear a lot of confusion between the words tenant and renter from learners.
It is a very common point of confusion.
I hear both used interchangeably all the time.
You certainly hear both in casual conversation. In American English, people do frequently say renter to describe the person who is paying to live in the property.
Like, I am a renter, or we are looking for new renters.
Exactly. However, the word tenant is universally understood across both the US and the UK. But more importantly than just being understood, tenant carries a much more professional, formal weight.
It sounds heavier.
It does.
It sounds like it belongs on a legal document.
Because it does belong there. When you refer to yourself as a prospective tenant rather than just a renter, you're deliberately using the language of contracts, property law, and formal agreements.
It commands a different level of respect from the person letting the property.
Without a doubt.
Is the difference between sounding like someone who is just passing through for a few weeks and someone who is establishing a life and taking on a legal responsibility?
It shows you understand the gravity of the transaction.
Now, to really illustrate how a lack of context around these specific words and concepts can completely derail even the most fluent English speaker, let's put a face to this frozen learner.
I think that's a great idea.
You brought up a story from the research about a woman trying to navigate the UK rental market that I think perfectly captures the emotional reality of this struggle.
Yes, let us talk about Priya.
Okay, tell us about Priya.
This is a fictionalized case study, but it is highly realistic and represents the exact wall that thousands of newly arrived professionals and students hit every single year.
So what's her situation?
Priya is originally from India. She had been living in Manchester in shared accommodation for about 6 months, getting her bearings, and she decided it was finally time to get her own flat.
A big milestone.
Very big. Now, we have to establish Priya's baseline here. Her English was excellent.
She wasn't a beginner.
Not at all. She worked in a professional corporate environment, she wrote detailed reports, and she had a flawless rental history back in her home country.
So on paper, if you looked at her credentials, she was the ideal tenant.
She was. She is exactly the listener we are talking to right now.
But the reality of actually standing in that flat hit her hard, didn't it?
It hit her like a ton of checks.
What happened?
She arranged her first property viewing. She probably dressed professionally, prepared herself mentally, and walked into the flat.
Ready to conquer.
And she described feeling completely, utterly out of her depth within the first 30 seconds.
Oh no, in just 30 seconds.
Yes. The letting agent was a busy professional, speaking at a normal, rapid conversational pace, and he hit Priya with an absolute avalanche of industry jargon.
An avalanche.
As he walked her through the rooms, he was casually throwing out phrases like, "Just so you know, the property is chain-free. It is available immediately on a rolling contract, and if you want to move forward, we will need to run a full referencing check by tomorrow."
I have to pause the story right there and ask the question that I know you, the listener, are probably shouting at your screen right now.
What is the question?
Do agents speak like this intentionally? Are they using this rapid-fire, dense jargon to deliberately intimidate people or to pressure them into signing something quickly before they can think?
It is a very fair suspicion to have when you feel overwhelmed, but generally speaking, the answer is no.
They aren't doing it on purpose?
No.
Yeah.
This is simply their everyday language. It is the water they swim in.
Right.
They say these exact phrases 50, maybe 100 times a week to other native speakers who know exactly what they mean.
So it's just habit.
They completely forget that for an immigrant or an English language learner, even an incredibly advanced one like Priya, it sounds like a heavily encrypted code.
They forget what it's like not to know it.
Absolutely. They suffer from the curse of knowledge. They assume because a concept is basic to them, it must be basic to everyone.
They don't realize they are speaking a microdialect.
That is a great term for it.
So let's be the code breakers here. Let's decode the specific jargon that hit Priya so you do not find yourself nodding along in a panic.
Let us start with chain-free.
I have to be honest, to someone learning English, if you tell me the apartment is chain-free, that sounds like you were talking about a bicycle.
Or a set of handcuffs.
Right. Or assuring me it's not a prison cell. How does a property have a chain?
It is a bizarre visual, if you take it literally.
It really is.
Chain-free is a very specific, very common British property term. To understand it, you have to understand the mechanism of buying and selling houses in the UK.
Okay, lay it out for us.
Often, a landlord is selling one property in order to buy another property. But the person they are buying from is also waiting to buy a property from someone else.
It's all connected.
Yes. This creates a literal chain of dependent financial transactions. If one person's mortgage falls through or one person changes their mind, the entire chain collapses and nobody moves anywhere.
Ah, so it is a chain of dependent sales.
Spot on. So when an agent proudly tells you a rental property or a home for sale is chain-free, it is a major selling point.
Because it means it's safe.
Exactly. It means there is no linked property sales slowing down the process. The current owner doesn't need to buy another house for you to move into this one.
The property is just sitting there ready for you.
The property is ready, vacant, and available without depending on a complex, fragile web of other real estate deals.
Okay, that makes perfect sense once you know the mechanism behind it. What about a rolling contract?
That's another big one.
That sounds equally terrifying. It sounds like a boulder I'm getting crushed under, or something that is completely out of control.
Again, the literal translation sounds alarming, but it is actually quite standard and often highly beneficial for you.
Oh, really?
Yes. A rolling contract refers to what happens after your initial fixed term expires.
So, after year 1,
Let us say you sign a lease for your first 12 months. When month 13 arrives, you do not necessarily have to sign a brand new, rigid year-long lease immediately.
you don't have to lock in again.
No. Instead, the agreement simply rolls over and continues on a month-by-month basis.
Oh, that's great.
It is. It gives the tenant a lot more flexibility to leave with just a month's notice, rather than being locked in for another full year.
So rolling just means continuing month to month automatically.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. And the last one, the agent threw at her.
Yeah.
Referencing.
We had touched on this a bit earlier when we discussed the cultural differences between the US and the UK.
We did, the narrative trust thing.
Right. Referencing or undergoing a referencing check is the standard British equivalent of an American background check.
It's the verification process.
It is the formal process where the letting agent or a third-party company contacts your current employer to verify your salary and contacts your previous landlords to verify your rental history and your character.
So let's go back to Priya standing in the flat. The emotional toll of this story is what really stands out to me.
It is incredibly disheartening.
Because Priya understood every single word that agent said on an individual level. She knows what a chain is. She knows the word free.
Right.
She knows rolling. She knows contracts.
She knows all the vocabulary out of context.
But strung together in that rapid-fire context, the meaning was completely opaque to her. And what did she do? She did what almost all of us do when we are embarrassed.
She smiled and nodded.
She just smiled, she nodded her head to pretend she understood, and she left the viewing without asking a single clarifying question.
And she probably spent the entire evening in her shared accommodation feeling deeply frustrated and doubting her own intelligence.
Which is the tragedy of the situation, because
Yeah.
her intelligence was never the issue.
Not at all. What she lacked was not grammar. She did not need another textbook lesson on verb conjugation or sentence structure.
She needed the context.
She needed the specific vocabulary situated in its real-world mechanism.
Right. And her nodding along is actually dangerous.
Very dangerous.
Because once you master the spoken jargon in the viewing, and you actually tell the agent, yes, I love the flat, I want to take it, you are immediately confronted with the written jargon.
The paperwork begins.
You pass the verbal test, and your prize is that they hand you a massive stack of legal paper.
It feels like a punishment sometimes.
It does. Let's guide this conversation out of the hallway and right into the legal labyrinth of the lease agreement. Because if the spoken words are confusing, the written ones belong to a whole new, highly consequential universe.
A universe with very real, very heavy financial consequences.
Let us start by simply naming the physical document you are going to sign.
Because, just like the word apartment versus flat, the terminology shifts wildly depending on where you are geographically located.
It's never simple, is it?
Never. If you are renting in the United States, the document you are handed is almost universally called a lease or a rental agreement.
Which is pretty straightforward.
Yes, it is the master document that outlines absolutely everything.
Yeah.
Your monthly rent, the TET policy, the rules for the security deposit, noise ordinances, everything.
It is nice, clean, one syllable. Lease. It's easy to remember, easy to say, I am signing the lease.
Very efficient.
But what happens when you cross the ocean to the UK? I bet it's not one syllable.
You would win that bet. In the UK, and we need to be specific here, in England and Wales, the standard legal equivalent of that document is called an assured short-hold tenancy agreement.
I'm sorry, an assured short hold tenancy agreement.
I know.
That is an absolute mouthful. I feel like I need a glass of water and a law degree just to get to the title. Why isn't it just called a lease?
It is a notoriously clunky title, but it is an essential phrase to commit to memory.
Why is it called that?
It stems from the Housing Act of 1988, which created this specific legal framework to give landlords a guaranteed or assured right to take their property back after a short specified period.
Assured short hold.
Exactly. Hence, assured short hold. If you are renting in England or Wales, this is the document you'll be signing.
You specified England and Wales. What about Scotland? Do they have a different name for it too?
We absolutely must mention Scotland because Scotland operates under an entirely different legal framework regarding property.
Okay, what do they call it up there?
Up there, you will sign what is called a private residential tenancy agreement.
Okay, still a mouthful, but a bit more modern sounding.
Yes. And what is truly fascinating about the Scottish version is that legally, it actually offers tenants considerably more protection and security of tenure than the English equivalent.
Really? Like what kind of protections?
For example, in Scotland, it is much harder for a landlord to evict you simply because they want to sell the property or raise the rent unpredictably.
That is incredible context, and it proves how much power is bound up in these specific regional documents.
It's not just a name change, it's a legal framework change.
But no matter what it is called, a lease, an assured short hold, whatever, a private residential agreement, the danger for you as a language learner remains exactly the same.
And what is that danger?
It is the danger of skimming. Look, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Even native speakers skim legal documents.
Oh, all the time.
Think about a software update for your phone. The terms and conditions pop up, it's 40 pages of dense legal text, and we all just scroll blindly to the bottom and hit accept so we can get back to our lives.
We treat leases the exact same way.
We really do. But for a non-native speaker, treating a housing contract like an Apple Terms of Service update is a recipe for disaster.
A very expensive disaster.
The financial consequences of missing a detail are massive.
They truly are. You absolutely cannot skim a lease. You're not agreeing to use a piece of software. You are agreeing to take on liability for a physical asset worth hundreds of thousands of dollars.
You are signing your life away, practically.
There are key terms embedded deep within these documents that you must understand deeply, not just superficially. Let us take a deep dive into one of the most critical financial elements of any lease: the deposit.
Ah, the deposit. This is the large chunk of money you have to hand over before they even think about giving you the keys to the front door.
That is the one. The security deposit is a lump sum of money, usually equivalent to 1 or sometimes 2 full months of rent.
Which is a huge amount of cash to part with.
It is. The landlord demands this money up front to hold as protection against any physical damage you might cause to the property during your stay, or as a buffer against any unpaid rent.
Okay, so it's a safety net for them.
Yes. Now, the rules governing how this money is handled, where it lives, and how you get it back are completely different depending on your location.
Let's break down the U.S. rules first. If I'm handing over $2,000 in Chicago, how does that security deposit work?
In the United States, security deposits are heavily governed by state law.
So it changes depending on where you are.
Yes, which means the exact rules will vary depending on whether you are renting in New York, Texas, or California.
That's confusing.
However, generally speaking, landlords are often legally required to hold your deposit in a completely separate, sometimes interest-bearing bank account.
So they can't just put it in their checking account.
No, they cannot just mix your $2,000 with their personal funds and use it to buy groceries.
Well, that's a relief.
And critically, they are required by law to return it to you minus any itemized deductions for repairs within a specific time frame after you move out.
How long do they have?
That time frame is often between 14 and 30 days, depending on the state.
Okay, so state law is the mechanism that governs the U.S. It's very decentralized.
Very.
What about the UK rules? I know there has been a lot of national legislation around this over the years to protect renters.
Yes, and this is a vital piece of knowledge that every renter in the UK must possess.
Okay, lay it out for us.
In the United Kingdom, since the year 2007, landlords have been legally obligated to put your deposit into a government-approved deposit protection scheme.
A government-approved scheme, so it's very official.
Extremely official. They physically cannot just hold on to your cash in their own bank account. They must register it with an independent third-party organization.
Wait, so the landlord physically doesn't even hold the money?
In many of the schemes, no, the money is held centrally by the scheme itself.
That seems much safer.
It is. And here is the truly empowering part for the tenant.
I love an empowering part.
If your landlord fails to protect your deposit in one of these approved schemes within a specific number of days, usually 30 days from receiving it, you, the tenant, are legally entitled to compensation.
Seriously.
Yes. The courts can actually order the landlord to pay you back up to 3 times the amount of the original deposit as a penalty for breaking the rules.
3 times the amount. That is huge.
It's a massive penalty.
Just think about how empowering it is to know the mechanism behind that rule. Imagine sitting across the desk from a letting agent in a busy London office.
They're rushing you along.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Instead of just nervously handing over a check, you look them in the eye and calmly, confidently ask, could you confirm which government-approved deposit protection scheme my deposit will be registered with?
Oh, that's brilliant.
You instantly go from being a vulnerable, passive applicant who doesn't know the rules to an empowered, highly informed tenant in a single sentence.
It completely changes the power dynamic of the conversation.
They realize they can't mess with you.
The agent immediately knows they cannot cut corners with you. Now, another critical area to unpack in the lease, which often catches people by surprise, is the section on utilities.
Oh yes, the hidden recurring costs of renting. We are talking about electricity, gas, water, internet, trash collection.
Spot on. In some rental agreements, particularly in large apartment complexes or shared housing, all or some of the utilities are included in your flat monthly rent.
Which is ideal.
Yes, you pay one number and the lights stay on.
Simple.
But in other agreements, the rent only covers the physical space, and it is entirely your responsibility to contact the utility companies, set up the accounts in your name, and pay the bills separately every month.
And the absolute worst thing you can do is assume how it works based on your home country.
Never assume.
We have a polished phrase, a sort of a magic question that you should absolutely memorize and deploy for this exact situation.
Yes, please share it.
When you are looking at the lease or speaking with the agent, you don't just say, do I pay water?
Which is too vague.
Right, you say. Could you confirm which utilities are included in the rent and which ones I would be responsible for arranging myself?
That sentence is structurally perfect.
I think so too.
It is highly professional, it is polite, but it leaves absolutely no room for ambiguity.
It forces the agent to stop and list out exactly what you need to know.
Which prevents a massive unexpected bill your first month.
And while we are talking about unexpected bills in the UK, we have to mention a very specific tax.
Oh, I know what you're going to bring up.
I remember being incredibly confused by this when I first saw it. It's called council tax.
Yeah.
What is the underlying logic of council tax, and why does it matter so much to a renter?
Council tax is a local government tax in the UK. It is calculated based on the estimated value of the property you are living in.
Okay.
The revenue from this tax goes directly to the local council to pay for municipal services in your specific area, things like rubbish collection, the local police force, fire services, and street lighting.
So it's paying for the neighborhood to function.
Exactly. Now, here is where it confuses people. In almost all standard rental situations, the tenant is legally responsible for paying the council tax, not the landlord.
And that is exactly what confused me. I remember thinking, wait, why am I the person merely renting the property, paying the local property tax for the area?
It trips up so many people.
Shouldn't the person who actually owns the valuable asset pay the tax on it? It feels backwards if you come from a country where the property owner absorbs all land taxes.
It is a very common point of confusion, but the logic behind the UK system is that the tax is primarily paying for the day-to-day services that the resident of the property is actively consuming.
So because I'm using the services, I pay for them.
Right. You are the one producing the rubbish that needs collecting. You are the one relying on the street lights when you walk home. Therefore, the occupier pays.
That makes a kind of practical sense, I guess.
It does, but it is a substantial extra monthly expense, often over £100 a month, that you must factor into your budget above and beyond your rent.
But there is a crucial exception to this rule, right? A specific money-saving tip for a certain group of listeners.
Yes, and this is a critical tip that can save you thousands of pounds.
Let's hear it.
If a property is occupied solely by full-time students, that property is often completely exempt from council tax.
Completely exempt.
Completely. The council assumes students do not have the income to support the tax burden.
Wow.
However, and this is the key, if you are a full-time student moving to the UK, You should raise this exemption with the letting agent or the local council immediately.
You can't just assume they know.
No, you have to actively apply for the exemption and prove your student status. The discount does not just happen automatically.
Which is a huge trap.
Do not end up paying a hefty monthly tax that you are legally exempt from simply because you did not know the vocabulary to ask about it.
So understanding these legal terms, deposits, utilities, council tax exemptions, that is how you protect the money you already have.
It is defensive knowledge.
Right. But what if you want to actively save money on the core price? What if the monthly rent is just a bit too high for your budget?
Now we're getting into the fun part.
Or the terrifying part. This leads us directly into a topic that makes a lot of people break out in a cold sweat. The art of rental negotiation.
It does make people incredibly nervous.
Why do you think that is?
The anxiety around negotiation is deeply, intrinsically tied to culture.
Let's talk about breaking those cultural taboos.
Yeah.
Because many of you listening come from cultures where negotiating rent is either heavily expected,
Yeah.
it is just part of the daily dance of commerce.
And paying the asking price is almost seen as foolish.
Exactly. Or conversely, you come from a culture where it is entirely forbidden, and questioning the listed price is seen as incredibly rude or confrontational.
Very true.
I know listeners are sitting there wondering, is it actually socially and professionally appropriate to negotiate rent in the US or the UK?
The definitive overarching verdict is yes, it is appropriate.
Okay, good to know.
In fact, if you approach it gracefully, doing it can save you a significant amount of money over the course of a 12 or 24-month tenancy.
So why do people avoid it?
The reason people freeze up or avoid it entirely is that they approach the conversation with the wrong mindset.
What's the right mindset?
The key mindset shift you need to make before you open your mouth is moving away from the idea of confrontation and moving toward the idea of collaboration.
I love that framing. You are not going into battle.
No.
You aren't trying to defeat the landlord and emerge victorious while they lose.
Spot on. You are trying to find a set of terms that work sustainably for both of you. Think about the landlord's mechanism. A landlord desperately wants a reliable tenant who pays the rent on time, doesn't cause trouble, and cares for the property.
Finding that person is stressful for them.
Very stressful.
Mm-hmm.
You, on the other hand, want a fair, affordable price. You are negotiating to find the exact intersection of those two desires.
It's a mutual problem-solving exercise.
When you frame it as a collaboration to secure a stable, long-term relationship, the whole conversation becomes considerably less intimidating.
So let's give the listener the specific linguistic tools for this collaboration. Let's role-play some assertive but not aggressive phrases.
Let's do it.
How do you actually initiate this delicate conversation without sounding rude or entitled?
A truly great opening script for success sounds something like this. You have viewed the property, you like it, and you say, I am genuinely interested in the property, and I was wondering if there is any flexibility on the rent.
Oh, that's smooth.
It works beautifully.
It is brilliant because of how it is structured. It starts with a compliment and a reassurance.
Mm-hmm.
I am genuinely interested.
Yes.
That instantly lowers the landlord's defenses and reassures them that you weren't just a time waster kicking the tires.
You establish serious intent.
And then wondering if there is any flexibility is so much softer and more collaborative than saying, I want to pay less or your price is too high.
Exactly. It invites them to make the next move.
But what if the rent is totally non-negotiable? Say you are in a super competitive market where 50 people want the exact same flat.
That is a harsh reality in cutthroat cities like London, New York, San Francisco, or Chicago.
What do you do then?
In those hyper-competitive markets, you might not get a single dollar or pound knocked off the monthly rent. The landlord knows they have 5 other people waiting outside willing to pay the full asking price.
You just give up.
No, but, and this is a crucial point, you can still negotiate on other terms.
Okay.
If the price is fixed, negotiate the value.
Negotiate the value. What does that sound like?
You could say, would you be open to including parking in the agreement, given that it is currently listed as an optional extra?
That is such a smart pivot. You are negotiating for total value, not just a headline price drop.
Absolutely.
If a parking space costs $100 a month, getting the landlord to include it in the base rent is mathematically the exact same as getting a $100 rent reduction.
It achieves the exact same financial goal.
What else can you negotiate if the actual rent number is set in stone?
There are many levers you can pull. You can ask them to replace a piece of worn or damaged furniture before you move in.
Or maybe a fresh coat of paint?
Yes. You could negotiate a longer notice period in the contract, which gives you more legal security and time to find a new place if they ever decide to sell.
That's a great idea.
Or you could ask for permission to make minor cosmetic alterations to the property, like painting a wall a different color or hanging heavy shelves, and have that specific permission written directly into the lease.
So negotiation is not just about the monthly dollar amount. It is about the total lifestyle value of the agreement.
Without a doubt.
And tone is absolutely everything here. The words matter, but how you deliver them matters just as much.
Delivery is critical.
There is a massive, highly visible difference between what we might call hesitant English and considered English. I want to demonstrate this difference for the listener.
I'd love to hear this.
If I try the wrong way, the hesitant way, it sounds something like this. I am standing in the flat, looking down at my shoes, wringing my hands, shifting my weight, and I nervously say, whoa, I was just thinking maybe if it is possible, could the rent perhaps be a little bit less?
Oh, wow. It physically hurts to hear it delivered that way.
It's bad, isn't it?
It is, because that anxious energy communicates deep insecurity. By using so many qualifiers, maybe, if it is possible, perhaps a little bit, you are essentially asking for a personal favor.
You are almost begging.
And landlords do not give discounts out of pity.
Right. So what's the alternative?
Now, contrast that hesitant approach with considered English, which is the right way to execute the negotiation.
Paint the picture for us.
You stand up straight, you make direct eye contact, you smile warmly, and you say calmly. I have done a fair amount of research on rental prices in this area, and I feel the current asking price is slightly above market rate. I am committed to being a reliable, long-term tenant, so I wanted to raise the possibility of a modest reduction.
Wow. Let's break down exactly why that second version works so well.
It works because of its absolute poise and structure. It is not arrogant, and it is not pushy, but it is incredibly firm.
You're standing your ground.
First, you are presenting objective facts. I have done a fair amount of research. You are telling them you are educated about their market.
You aren't just guessing.
Second, you are explicitly presenting your own value. I am committed to being a reliable, long-term tenant.
Reminding them of what they want.
Yes, you are reminding them of their own desires. They want reliability. You are communicating that you are a catch, that they should actively want you to live there rather than begging them for a discount.
It commands respect.
It really does.
But even when you have mastered the confidence and you are communicating perfectly, you still have to watch out because the listing itself might be lying to you.
Oh, this is a very important point.
Which brings us to one of my absolute favorite parts of this deep dive. The tricky, culturally nuanced, and sometimes hilarious world of property euphemisms.
It is an absolute minefield for a language learner.
I can imagine.
And it really highlights the stark, almost comical contrast between British understatement and American directness. British rental culture, in particular, leans incredibly heavily on euphemism and understatement.
They don't like to just say things bluntly.
No, they do not. If you are an advanced English learner who takes the words written in a property listing at their literal dictionary definition, you are going to be utterly confused.
And probably deeply disappointed when you show up.
Very disappointed.
It is so funny. I use an analogy for this all the time.
Let's hear it.
Reading British property listings is exactly like reading a dating profile.
Oh, I love this.
You know how it works on dating apps?
Then.
The person isn't technically lying, but they are deploying heavily coded language.
Right.
When someone writes, "I love a quiet night in" on their profile, they are trying to sound cozy and romantic. But what it really means in practice is, I am exhausted and I refuse to ever leave the house on a Friday night.
That is so true.
It is heavily, heavily softened to sound appealing. Real estate listings do the exact same thing with physical spaces.
That is a perfectly accurate analogy. It is the real estate version of catfishing.
Let us playfully decode some of this classic British agent speak, because it really is like cracking a code.
Okay, hit me.
If I am sitting at my laptop reading a listing for a flat in central London, and the agent has prominently described the space as compact, what am I actually walking into when I show up for the viewing?
If a British letting agent resorts to calling a property compact, they almost certainly mean it is incredibly, unbelievably small.
Like, how small?
We're talking about a space where you might be able to stand in the middle of the bedroom and touch both opposite walls at the exact same time.
Oh, wow.
It is a polite way of saying there is barely enough room to breathe.
Okay, what if the agent smiles brightly and tells me the property has a great deal of potential? That sounds positive.
It does sound positive.
In any other context, potential is a great thing. You want a job with potential, a partner with potential.
In the dictionary, yes, potential is positive. In a British property viewing, however, a great deal of potential is a massive red flag.
A red flag, why?
It means the place is currently a disaster. It needs significant repair, major structural renovation work, or at the very least, a complete and expensive cosmetic overhaul.
So it's a ruin.
It is the agent's way of admitting that it looks terrible right now, but maybe with enough money and imagination, it could be nice in the future.
That is amazing. How about the neighborhood? The listing says the flat is located in a really up-and-coming area.
Oh, up and coming. That's a classic.
It sounds exciting.
Up and coming is a polite, heavily softened way of signaling that the neighborhood is not very desirable right now. It might lack basic amenities like grocery stores, it might be a bit rough around the edges, or it might have a higher crime rate than the surrounding areas.
So it's not actually there yet.
Exactly. The agent is implying that property developers are starting to buy things up, and it might get better eventually, but right now it is gritty.
And what if they describe the flat as a blank canvas? To an artist, a blank canvas is inspiring.
In property terms, a blank canvas means the flat is totally empty and completely undecorated. There is no furniture, no appliances, sometimes not even carpets or curtains.
Literally blank.
Now, depending on your budget and your energy levels, that could indeed be a fun, creative project. But for most renters, a blank canvas translates to a massive, unexpected financial burden because you suddenly have to go out and buy every single lampshade, rug, and microwave yourself just to make it livable.
The catfishing is real.
It is very real.
But it's not just the British who do this. American agent speak has its own code as well, right? Americans are generally known globally for being much more direct communicators, but real estate brings out the euphemisms everywhere.
It does. Even Americans soften the blow when selling a bad apartment.
Give me an American example.
In the U.S., if a listing describes an apartment as cozy, it universally means the exact same thing as the British compact.
So it's tiny.
It means it is tiny. If you see cozy, expect to bump your knees on the furniture.
Cozy equals tiny. Got it. What about charming? I see charming all the time in listings for older cities like New York, Boston, or Chicago. A charming one-bedroom.
Charming is a very specific American euphemism. It usually means the building is old and, frankly, dated.
Dated how?
It might have delightfully creaky hardwood floors, but the plumbing might be ancient and loud, the electrical outlets might be in weird places, and the original windows might let in a freezing draft all winter.
So it looks nice, but functions poorly.
It has character, yes, but charming is often a polite mask for old, slightly inconvenient, and desperately in need of modernization.
This euphemistic language doesn't just stop at the description of the property.
Yeah.
It also extends to the actual agreement process, doesn't it?
It does, and that is where it gets legally dangerous.
Let's talk about the phrases used for provisional agreements, the limbo period before the final ink is actually on the paper.
Yes, the terminology here is critical because if you misunderstand it, you might think you have successfully secured a home before you actually legally have.
Give us the British version first.
In the UK, you will frequently hear the phrase subject to contract. For example, a landlord might call you and say, "Great news, the flat is yours, subject to contract."
And a language learner hears the flat is yours and immediately starts celebrating.
Exactly, but they miss the crucial qualifier. Subject to contract means you have an agreement in principle everyone intends to move forward, but it is not legally binding yet.
So it could still fall apart.
Either party, you or the landlord, can still legally walk away without any financial penalty whatsoever until the actual physical contract is signed by both of you. It is a provisional state.
And what is the American equivalent of that limbo state?
In the U.S., you will hear phrases like pending approval or contingent on background check.
It's the same idea.
It represents the exact same concept, a provisional agreement that requires formal legal confirmation before it is locked in. Do not cancel your backup options or buy new furniture while a property is still pending or subject to contract.
So we have covered a truly massive amount of ground here today.
We really have.
You now know the transatlantic vocabulary differences. You understand the deep cultural mechanisms behind credit checks and references. You know the names of the legal documents, and you know how to decode the hidden catfishing meanings of property euphemisms.
It's a lot to absorb.
It is. But as we know, intellectual knowledge is only half the battle. How do you actually practice this? How do you internalize it before you are standing in a hallway, sweating, holding a legally binding document?
That is the million-dollar question.
Let's move into the mindset shift and some actionable strategies you can use today.
First, we need to address the emotional elephant in the room, the anxiety.
Yes, the nerves.
I encourage you right now to reflect on the specific flavor of anxiety you feel when imagining yourself standing in that unfurnished flat with a fast-talking agent.
Just picturing it makes my heart rate go up.
The fear of making a costly mistake or sounding foolish is very real, and it is entirely valid. High-stakes language situations naturally provoke a physiological anxiety response. Your heart rate goes up, your working memory decreases.
It is terrifying. You are operating under the fear that one wrong vocabulary word means you lose the apartment you love, or worse, you accidentally sign away your legal rights.
But we need a perspective shift here to calm those nerves down before you walk into a viewing.
What's a shift?
The reassurance you need to internalize is this: landlords and letting agents are not out to get you.
The enemy.
No, they are not language examiners waiting for you to fail a grammar test so they can laugh at you. They are business people who simply want a reliable, communicative tenant to rent their property so they can stop doing viewings.
They just want to close the deal with a good person.
Absolutely. If you can deploy this specific English, the phrases, the questions, the tone we have discussed today, you definitively prove that you are that tenant.
You prove you're the reliable one.
You demonstrate competence and responsibility. That alone puts you head and shoulders above the vast majority of applicants, native speakers included.
So what is the actual homework here? You shouldn't be trying to invent these strategic sentences on the fly while you're under pressure.
Not at all.
You need a back pocket arsenal of phrases. I want you to physically collect and rehearse sentences out loud. Create a dedicated document on your phone or designate a page in your notebook right now.
Write these down, seriously.
Let's build that arsenal. Walk us through a few of the heaviest hitters that every renter should have memorized.
Gladly. Write this first one down because it is essential for the paperwork stage. Could you walk me through the terms of the tenancy agreement?
I love that because it puts the work back on them. You aren't pretending to understand 40 pages of legalese. You're asking them to synthesize it for you, ensuring you do not miss any major clauses.
Exactly. Next one.
What's the next one?
This is for when you are actually reviewing the contract. Is there a break clause in the contract? And if so, when does it take effect?
A break clause. Explain that.
This is a phenomenal, highly strategic question. A break clause is a specific provision that allows you to end the tenancy early under certain conditions without paying a penalty.
Oh, that's incredibly useful to know.
Asking about it shows a highly sophisticated understanding of your legal rights. It immediately tells the agent you are a serious, educated tenant who cannot be taken advantage of.
What about the pressure of the moment itself? Say you were sitting in the office, they push the thick contract across the desk, hand you a fancy pen, and stare at you expectantly.
That is the highest pressure moment.
What do you say?
In that exact scenario, you look at them and say firmly, I would like to take a few days to review the agreement before signing. Is that possible?
Is it actually okay to say that?
I want to stress this. Never, ever feel pressured to sign a legal document immediately in the office. This sentence is entirely reasonable, it is standard practice, and any reputable landlord or agent will respect it.
And if they don't respect it?
If they try to force you to sign immediately, that is a massive red flag. Walk away.
And let's get one for the practical side of actually living in a property day to day.
Try this one. Could you clarify who is responsible for maintenance and repairs? Is there a standard process for reporting issues?
That's a good one.
This question shows excellent foresight. It proves to the landlord that you plan to take good care of their physical property and that you want to follow their specific rules for when the boiler inevitably breaks.
Write these down. Rehearse them out loud.
Say them in the mirror. Focus on the intonation until they feel entirely natural in your mouth.
And the second piece of homework is what we can call contextual reading. How can listeners use the internet to practice this real estate register without the pressure of actually applying for apartments?
I heavily advise reading real rental listings purely for the vocabulary.
Like browsing listings for fun.
You are not looking for a place to live. You are hunting for the language in its natural habitat.
Where should they look?
If you are targeting the U.S. market, go to websites like Zillow, Apartments.com, or Craigslist.
And for the UK?
If you are aiming for the UK market, spend an hour browsing through Rightmove or Zoopla.
But what is the specific method they should use when they are on these sites? Just scrolling through pictures of kitchens isn't going to help.
No, you have to be highly intentional. Sit down at your computer and read 10 complete listings in a row.
Actively read them.
As you read the descriptions, actively hunt for unknown expressions, euphemisms, or legal jargon. When you find a phrase you do not know, like chain-free or charming, look it up, decode its true meaning.
And then what?
And then this is the crucial step. Write a brand new sentence of your own using that phrase in context.
Oh, actually produce the language.
This active method beats staring at isolated theoretical vocabulary lists every single time. It builds genuine, intuitive market familiarity.
You start to decode the matrix.
You will start to see the recurring patterns in how agents write, what landlords value, and what the hidden codes really mean.
It is the ultimate grand synthesis of language and life.
It really is.
Take a moment to think about the magnitude of what you have achieved just by listening to this session today and committing to this process. You haven't just learned a few new grammar rules or memorized a dictionary definition.
You've learned a survival skill.
You have learned how to confidently navigate high-pressure viewings, how to decode complex legal leases, how to handle high-stakes financial negotiations without backing down, and how to interpret the subtle cultural understatement of an entirely different country.
It is a remarkable leap in capability. And if we connect this specific set of skills to the much bigger picture of your life, housing is so much more than just finding physical shelter from the rain.
It's the foundation.
Securing your own housing is the foundation of independence. Mastering this specific, complex register of English allows you to truly advocate for yourself.
It gives you a voice.
It gives you the power and the voice to communicate clearly and forcefully with landlords, estate agents, massive utility companies, and your everyday neighbors.
It changes everything.
It is the critical bridge between merely surviving in a new, unfamiliar country and truly thriving in it as an empowered resident.
Absolutely. It is about planting your feet firmly in a new city, looking around, and being able to confidently say, I know exactly how things work here, and I belong here.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Now, as we wrap up, we want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over on your own time.
Yes. Now that you realize the world of real estate has its own entirely hidden dialect, complete with euphemisms and unwritten rules, what other major life milestones have a secret English register that you need to decode next?
Think about the process of opening a business bank account, or interviewing for a massive corporate promotion, or trying to navigate a complex foreign healthcare system.
Each of these specific worlds has its own vocabulary, its own unwritten cultural rules, its own hidden expectations. Which one of those codes will you decode next?
A brilliant question and a worthy challenge to leave you with. The learning never really stops, does it?
There is always another layer to uncover.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. If you found this session valuable, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel.